The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Wisconsin.
College students can be hard to engage. Sitting in big lecture halls, often with the internet and cell phones at their fingertips, it can be easy to tune out the professor in favor of a myriad of other distractions. However, most every student has that one course that's so interesting, so rewarding, that even Facebook can't compete. What makes that class different? We'll investigate innovative and engaging teaching techniques next, during office hours. Hi, I'm Ken Goldstein, Professor of Political Science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Big Ten institutions are well known for their world-class research, but also are committed to teaching. And one UW-Madison professor is working to make the learning experience here even better. Joining me today is Teri Balser, Professor of Soil Science and Director of the Institute for Biology Education. She has won numerous teaching awards and is also a member of the UW Teaching Academy. She was also recently named U.S. Professor of the Year by the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education and the Carnegie Foundation. Welcome to Office Hours, Teri.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure to have you here. So, this Professor of the Year award, obviously a very big deal. It's not like a couple hundred of these are given out. You were one of 4 who was given the award across the entire country.
Yep. There were 4 national award winners, one in each category: the doctoral degree granting, master's degree, bachelor's, and then community colleges, 2-year colleges. And so I was the national winner for doctoral degree granting. They also had state awards, and different states have U.S. state.
But a great honor and a great thing for UW, not like Little League Baseball now, where everyone gets a trophy. It was one of 4. Yes. Now, this award was because of your excellent teaching, and a lot of your teaching has been a byproduct of a pretty major change that you made in how you taught a couple years ago. Was there some sort of light bulb moment when you were an assistant professor when you just thought, I got to change the way I'm doing this?
Absolutely. I realized actually maybe about 3 years after I got here that I was really teaching what I was interested in and not necessarily teaching what the students needed to learn or what they might be interested in. And so it was pretty typical. I was the expert in my field and I was just giving them the information, and I got to do some book groups and creating collaborative learning environments with the Delta program here, and that really had me think more deeply about what are my students getting out of my class? Are they just sitting there getting their grade and walking away? Are they actually learning something? And so I started asking about what are you learning, and started reading the literature and realized that maybe only 2% of my students were going to go on to become academics like I am, and that meant that 98% of my students really weren't that interested in learning for its own sake, and they don't learn like I do. And so that was kind of the light bulb moment, was if I really want to engage them, if I really want them to get something out of my class, I have to think about what's interesting to them and what do they need to learn and how will they use the information that I'm presenting, and not just present them things that I happen to think are important that were taught to me. That was a big, big shift in my thinking. Well, who is this class for? Is it for me or is it for them?
And typically, what would your students look like in the large intro class? So you'd just been out of graduate school where you were in small seminars with all people who obviously were committed to biology and committed to soil biology. And now suddenly you have 200 students. Some of them are taking it because they want to, some are taking it because they have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the students. There's a much wider range of interest levels, obviously a much wider range of background preparation. They'll be sitting back in the back playing on Facebook or, texting their friends, or reading the paper is a big one. They'll just have the paper up in front of them and completely ignoring what's going on in the front of the classroom. So there's a range of the way they look, bored. Some of them are interested. Some of them are actually get up and walk out. It's different, definitely different.
So you knew you had this problem, and you had some intuition that you had to change it and something among small groups, but you still needed to teach these big classes. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, I started to look at the kind of the context of the class. What's the topic? What do I want the students to come away being able to do? Not just what do I want them to know, but how do I want them to be able to think about the material? How can we make it useful to them? And so I kind of sat back and said, well, what do we need to change in order to make that happen? I teach a range of classes from smaller, like 40 students, all the way up to close to 200 students. And so in the smaller class, I could make it more interactive with me, more like a discussion, and then have them talking to each other, so much more active. In the larger class, we restructured it entirely so that the students actually work in small groups, and we have 35 small groups working simultaneously in the classroom and having discussions and really wrestling with the material and making some sense out of it for themselves.
So you would go into the big class, give some introductory words, and then what's an example of a sort of exercise you would split them up into 35 small groups about?
Sure. Well, they're assigned to a group, and they get to know their group, and they work really well with their group, and they do, they generally would have a presentation at the beginning of the class on the topic, and sometimes that's me. Very often it's actually guest lecturers from all around campus, because I'm not the expert. Let's bring in the ones who really do study this stuff, so the students get that fresh perspective, and they come in, give a presentation, and then the students will really think about it. We had a presentation on invasive species, which is a real serious problem all around the world. And the students,
especially here in the Midwest.
Especially here in the Midwest. And the students then sat in their groups, and they had to basically design their own invasive species and then go invade another group, and then figure out how would they, and then they were then in turn themselves invaded, and figure out, well, how would I manage this species? How would I control it? And I don't know anything about it. The other group invented it, and they're sending it at me. And so it was fun, it was creative, it was active. It was also exactly the way that scientists have to approach dealing with invasive species. When something arrives on our doorstep, we don't know what it is, how it eats, how it gets around, and how to control it. And so that's what these students were practicing. Meanwhile, laughing and actually having fun in the classroom.
Excellent. We're going to take a quick break. Hope you'll all stay with us as we have what I hope is an active discussion about active learning. Please stay with us on Office Hours.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Where others saw lumber, we recognized a treasure. Where others saw the night, we chose the stars. Where others saw pieces, we unlocked the puzzle that could mean the end of paralysis and cancer. Since 1848, thinkers and achievers at Wisconsin have fearlessly sought ideas that transform the world. Keep on, Wisconsin. Keep on.
Welcome back to Office Hours. We're here with Professor Teri Balser, who is a biologist who works on soil science, but we're talking with her today about teaching. So in the last segment, Teri, we were talking, you gave us an example of how you would teach invasive species. And of course, a real interesting topic here in the Midwest is invasive fish species in the Great Lakes. And you talked about how you split your class into groups. Now, one thing when I'm always worrying about teaching, yeah, I see the value that you were discussing when you split into groups, but there's also a danger when you split into groups of some students being stronger than others, some students frankly being free riders on everybody else. How do you deal with that, and how might you answer some crotchety person like me or even older who said you can't do groups because that's going to let some people get by? Absolutely,
and it really is a problem. It can be a problem. One of the things we do is we assign them to a group, and we have them get to know their group members' strengths and challenge areas across the semester. So that's important. When we assign them to groups, we actually deliberately mix them up in disciplines. So in Environmental Studies 101, we have 50 different majors. So when we make the groups, we put an English major with a math major, with a chemist, with a biologist, with a political scientist. So they all
So it's not just sort of count off by ones?
Not at all. It's actually very deliberate so that they bring that varied perspective to any given problem, because that's how the real world works for environmental studies and environmental issues. We need all of the perspectives. So what that means is each person has something unique to contribute. No matter whether they're a stronger student or a less strong student. That's one thing we do. We also have them, in their first week with their group, complete an exercise on what I love about groups, what I hate about groups. And we give them a deliberate opportunity to write down, to talk with each other, What makes a group work? How are we going to work when we run into challenges that groups often face? What are my typical tendencies in a group? Do I withdraw? Do I dominate? Do I always look at the time? So we actually have them think about that. We make it very transparent. We acknowledge that a lot of times students hate groups. And that seems to work really well. There are very few problem groups as we go along. We also use peer facilitators, which are students who took the class in years past, and they come back and earn internship credit for helping facilitate the groups. And so their job is to engage everyone in conversation and ensure that the discussion is more evened out. So we try to address it in that variety of ways, and like I said, it seems to be working. We very, very rarely have to change up groups or move students around.
So let's go back to our invasive species
Sure.
example, and you talk about how you currently teach it in small groups. How might you have taught that 10 years ago?
Well, 10 years ago, I'm sure that I would have stood up at the front of the class and I would have had an overhead transparency, because that's what we had, and I would have listed, I would have flipped them, I would have put it down, there would have been a list, these are the most important invasive species, then there would have been another list which would have, these are the traits to look out for, this is what's, I would have been telling them, this is what's important about invasive species. I might have written some things down on the board and I probably would have just been facing the board the whole time and not actually facing the students or interacting with them at all. Now, the difference is they're helping each other learn about invasive species. They're having fun while they're doing it. We're asking them questions. Why do you think this is important? Here's a little bit of information. Now you tell us, what do we do with this information? And what does this tell us about invasive species and our economy and why we need to know about them?
Now, at the end, do you do a little bit? It's now we don't use overheads, right? We have PowerPoints.
Right.
I mean, do you do a summing up of everything? Because I'm sure some groups are going to do better than others.
Sure.
Some groups are going to have
Sure.
good suggestions. Some groups are going to have
Sure.
suggestions that could lead people astray in their understanding. Is there some summing up at the end?
We actually do more of that at the beginning. So we use PowerPoint at the beginning and present them with information that they might need to know that might be helpful when they're working in their group, sort of an overview of the topic. But what's great in the invasive species lecture this year was actually given by a graduate student who was in my class to learn how to teach large classes, and he did a fantastic job. But the idea is to stop and actually engage the students, ask them a question. Don't just tell them how it is, but actually ask them what they think. And it's very rare that the student doesn't come up with exactly what I might have told them. They know a lot more than we tend to assume that they do. They aren't just empty vessels that we fill. They come with a lot of ideas and information and background training, and it works a lot better to elicit that from them and let them use it. Respect them as adults, respect them as intelligent human beings, and I think that makes the classroom a much more rewarding place for them, for me, and for all of us.
Okay, so we're going to take another break. When we come back, I want to discuss how you test them and also how you test yourself in terms of evaluating how you're doing.
Sure.
So please stay with us with Teri Balser, award-winning professor, one of 4 Professors of the Year last year in the United States, joining us today on Office Hours.
Great People is our campaign for need-based scholarship aid. It's the key to the long-term well-being of the university as a whole.
In 1970, tuition cost about $500.
Today, it's about $9,000.
We don't want UW-Madison to be a university that is deemed to be out of reach.
The Great People Scholarship gives students a chance to succeed in life.
Support the Great People Scholarship. Visit uwgreatpeople.org.
Welcome back to Office Hours. I'm here with Teri Balser talking about teaching and talking about learning. I always teach the big, huge Intro American Politics class, which I love doing. And every year I teach it, the first day I can be all excited about what I'm doing. 3 hands always go up and want to know what's going to be on the midterm and when it's going to be and what the mode is going to be and what exactly they have to know. And then my favorite question is always, will the test be on the readings or will it be on the lecture, of which, of course, the answer is yes. I'm sure you get those sorts of questions, but you also try and do different sorts of testing to evaluate your students, because we do need to evaluate students in what we do as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to give them an opportunity to demonstrate what they're learning.
And to synthesize what they're learning.
And to synthesize, absolutely. And my big concern with testing is that it's become too focused on the grade. The students, we've trained them to be focused on the grade instead of thinking about what's the purpose of the test or the evaluation or the assessment. And it becomes the end goal instead of learning being the end goal. And so I really worry about that. I tend to avoid giving tests as much as I possibly can. And when I do give tests, I try very hard to make it about what are they learning. And if they don't do as well on the test as they wanted to, giving them an opportunity to try again and relearn the material, learn it better. Really, I think of it as demonstrating their learning to me. And that can happen in a wide range of ways. In one of my classes, the students had to produce a product that would teach something from the class to a non-academic audience in some way. And so we had a fair at the end where people demonstrated board games that they had developed, or Wikipedia articles, or songs that they had written and recorded and put on YouTube. All kinds of crazy things, and they were all very, very good. And so it was a really alternative way of them demonstrating what they learned. Other times, I ask them to just simply reflect on what they've learned and share that with me. If I do have to give an exam, it would be have them collaborate with me in generating questions for the exam. So there's no mystery about it. This is about learning, not about testing. And that seems to work. I'm more satisfied with what we get from that. It shifts the class emphasis away from the final grade. And yes, we still get the questions. Is this going to be on the test? Well, how much do I exactly have to memorize? But I try to design everything in the class to shift the students' attitude away from that and say, relax, you're going to be fine. You'll get the grade you want to get. I start out everybody in class on the first day by telling them everyone starts with an A in this class. So all you need to do is hang on to that A. So you've already got it. The assumption is you are an A student, and let's move forward from there. And I ask them to tell me why you're going to keep your A and how you're going to keep your A. And again, it's about shifting the attitude so that it's not about grade grubbing, it's not about points grubbing, but it's about we're here to learn. Let's get that other stuff out of the way.
But there is a little bit of a tension there, because one thing we're clearly doing as a university is teaching them. And what you're saying is you want them to prove to you that they've mastered something, that they understand what you're teaching, and then the grade will come. The other thing a university does is we make differentiations between our students, frankly, for other people to then use those as cues, whether it be graduate school, whether it be law school, whether it be employers. And how do you deal with that tension, or would you argue we need to just get away from that tension?
It's such a tough one because, yes, the problem with grades is we use them as a bin, as a category that's supposed to indicate something, but it really doesn't indicate anything. I can have two students, each of whom have an A, and we have no idea how or why they got that A, they received or earned that A. In one case, the student might have worked incredibly hard, started from a place much further back, came to class every time, just put a lot of effort into it, and received an A. The other student, maybe this was a second time they've taken a class, maybe they just took it because it was an easy A for them. They had more preparation coming in. They didn't have to work very hard. They didn't come to class very often. They also got an A. So to the employer, those two students look the same. So how do we help the employer distinguish which student they actually want to hire? Do they want to hire the one that just kind of coasted, or do they want to hire the one that really challenged themselves and worked really hard? That's the issue. That I don't know how we get around it unless we go like Santa Cruz and get rid of grades entirely and have a written summary and evaluation for each student. But I'm not sure that's practical at a school this size.
Of this size, exactly. So we're going to take another last break here. Please stay with us on Office Hours as we talk about teaching and learning at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with award-winning Professor Teri Balser. Stay with us.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Welcome back to Office Hours, where we're talking teaching and learning with award-winning Professor Teri Balser. Teri, The model that you've outlined about how you teach, is that controversial at all within higher education? Is that controversial at all here at University of Wisconsin-Madison, even within your department when you tell your colleagues, this is how I'm going to teach these particular courses?
Sure, absolutely. Somewhat depends on how you define controversial. Nationally, there's a huge push to transform the way that we teach our undergraduates, and somewhat our graduate students. There's a recognition that they're not, well, the books that have come out recently, they're not learning very much. And it's because they don't need us to give them a whole bunch of information. They can go to Google and look up a whole bunch of information. What they need from us as instructors is an experienced learner to help them make sense of all that information. And that's our role, and our role is shifting. And so the controversy comes in with people who maybe aren't comfortable with a different role, or they're not sure what that role should be, and they're much more accustomed to just delivering information at our students. And so I think that's where some of the controversy comes in. There's also, I don't understand quite the assumption that seems to be at play, but that science at least should be boring, that it should be taught very seriously, and that if they're having fun and I'm having fun, then something must be wrong. And so there is some controversy there, I think. Locally, I don't know exactly how it is at other places, but this idea that if I'm entertaining them and they're being entertained, that somehow that's a bad thing. Now, if they never learned anything at all, that would probably be a bad thing. They could go to the movies and be entertained. But if their interest is piqued in the subject, and then we provide them some substance, and then they have a chance to use it and play with it and think about it, then I would argue that it isn't wrong at all.
We have about a minute left, and I don't want to call our colleagues dogs, but can you teach old dogs new tricks? Are these teaching techniques? Is good teaching something that can be taught, or you're born a good teacher, you're born a bad teacher?
You know, I think everybody has a range of competency, obviously. It's more, what we can teach is finding your own style. That was a big thing when I was first here, is learning not to teach like somebody else, but to find out how I teach and what am I passionate about and what am I enthusiastic about. And when I give that to the students, then we have success. And I think the big mistake is to try to teach like somebody else. And those are things that I think can be discovered, letting go of these ideas about how teaching should be and really shifting to learning. And how do we want them learning, and what do we want them learning? And remembering that it's about them. It's not about me just getting through a teaching assignment.
Teri, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. A real interesting discussion about learning and teaching here at UW. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Don't forget, Office Hours is on the web via our university website, Facebook or Twitter, but not while you're in class. Take a look and let us know your thoughts. From the University of Wisconsin-Madison, this has been Office Hours. Thanks for stopping by.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Wisconsin in association with the Big Ten Network.